So did Antifa firebomb Ice Cube's tour bus in Portland, or is it just a coincidence?
The streets exploded with chaos. People yelling, "Did Antifa torch Ice Cube's bus thinking it was ice? Madness or mistaken identity? Either way, this was wild. The story twisted faster than a crime flick gone rogue, and social media couldn't stop spinning. It all went down one hot summer night in Portland. Boom! Ice Cube's tour bus suddenly blazing in the middle of the city. Within minutes, headlines were screaming Antifa, ICE, and bus fire, turning timelines into battlegrounds. To some, it looked like straight-up political warfare. To others, it was just another spark in a city that's seen more flames, protests, and tear gas than peace in years. But then came the craziest rumor yet. Some folks said Antifa thought the ICE on Cube's bus stood for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, a total mix-up that could have turned a superstar's ride into an accidental target. Imagine thinking you're going after the feds and torching a rap legend's tour bus instead. Insane. That confusion alone lit up the internet like gasoline on a match, turning a random fire into a full-blown cultural battle. Now here's the real deal. Ice Cube was in Portland for his Truth to Power tour when one of his tour buses went up in flames. Witnesses said the fire started near the tire well, shooting flames so high they nearly reached the windows. Firefighters came flying in, water blasting, smoke pouring, saving the bus from being completely toasted. Thankfully, no injuries. The blaze burned up one side of the ride, leaving behind cracked glass, black streaks, and a scorched panel. When Cube finally spoke, his tone was calm but heavy, like a man used to chaos who wasn't surprised by it anymore. Cube didn't call it a personal hit. He said, "A coward like that would burn anybody's property out there." That line hit hard. He wasn't crying victim. He was calling out the recklessness for what it was. Whoever did it wasn't brave. They were just careless and dangerous. Still, Portland fire officials didn't shut the door on anything. They said the flames started near the wheel well, but couldn't confirm if it was an electrical glitch, a busted part, or someone's sick idea of a statement. Whatever the cause, one thing's for sure. This fire burned more than metal. It lit up a nation already on edge. Then came the shattered window, and that's when things went completely off the rails. People online lost their minds trying to figure it out. Did firefighters smash it open to release the smoke?
Did Antifa firebomb Ice Cube's tour bus in Portland, or is it just a coincidence?
Or did some vandals come back and take another swing after the fire started? No one had a straight answer, and when the truth's missing, social media starts writing its own story. Fast. That's when the craziest theory took over, the so-called Antifa firebomb plot. The logic was wild, but in Portland's chaos, even the wild sounded believable. Protesters were already swarming the streets near the local ICE center night after night, so when folks spotted ICE on Cube's bus, the rumor was born. Maybe some hot-headed activist thought it belonged to Immigration and Customs Enforcement and decided to send a message. It sounded ridiculous, but somehow it stuck. YouTube channels and Twitter threads ran with it like gasoline on flames. Memes flew, reaction videos popped up, and the story just kept growing. Conservative voice Anthony Brian Logan went viral after dropping one loaded word, coincidence. He laid out his take, saying maybe the protesters weren't targeting Cube at all. Maybe they thought it was an ICE vehicle, or maybe they actually saw Ice Cube himself as a threat for speaking out of line politically. And that's the twist that hit hard. Cube had made waves for not always sticking to the mainstream narrative during interviews and podcast appearances. Some people labeled him suspect just for thinking differently. Logan argued that in a city like Portland, where emotions were already boiling, it wouldn't take much, just confusion, politics, or pure chaos to set something off. Maybe it really was mistaken identity. Maybe it was symbolic revenge gone wrong. ICE misread as ICE. Maybe it was just awful timing mixed with smoke, tension, and a city already burning. But let's be real. When protests light up every night and the president's calling Antifa a terrorist group, the word coincidence doesn't sound convincing anymore. To understand why this rumor gripped people so hard, you've got to remember what Portland looked like back then. It was practically a battle zone. The ICE building had become a nightly battlefield, with federal agents facing off against massed crowds throwing rocks, fireworks, and Molotovs. Chaos ruled the streets, and trust was long gone. The Department of Homeland Security even blasted out warnings online, claiming Antifa-linked groups were attacking officers, setting fires, and leaking agents' home addresses to intimidate them. It was straight-up madness in real time. So when Ice Cube's bus went up in flames, it didn't just scorch metal, It ignited a fresh round of fear, politics, and conspiracy that left everyone wondering who really struck the match. Flyers started popping up everywhere, bold black ink screaming across street poles and walls, calling for activists to suit up with masks, shields, and gas gear. They promised to bring that wild Portland energy roaring back to life. One flyer even declared, "We cook your meals, we haul your trash, we drive your ambulances, we are everywhere." It read like a battle cry straight out of a rebellion movie. Pure chaos on paper. And in that moment, it captured exactly what Portland had turned into. A boiling pot seconds from blowing its lid. So when Ice Cube's massive tour bus burst into flames, it was like the city's madness had just found its perfect symbol. The thought that protesters could have mistaken his ICE logo for an actual government vehicle sounded insane, but not impossible in a place drowning in graffiti that shouted "ICE" on every wall. The atmosphere was thick with smoke, tension, and rage, and anything that even looked like authority was fair game. And the timing, unreal. Donald Trump had already declared battle on Antifa, calling them professional agitators and flooding Portland with federal troops. He was cracking down hard, signing executive orders, pushing for new anti-terror laws, and labeling Antifa as a domestic terror group. The stage was set. Every night looked like a battle zone, and the whole country was watching. That's what made this moment feel almost cinematic. The same night, Trump's feds were clashing with black-clad protesters in the streets. A hip-hop icon's luxury tour bus went up in flames. Whether it was pure coincidence or something darker, the imagery was perfect fuel for every headline. America under attack, radicals on the loose, even celebrities getting caught in the line of fire. It was the perfect storm for the law and order message, and people ran with it fast. Commentators jumped in instantly. Anthony Brian Logan hinted that maybe this wasn't just bad luck. Something about it felt too convenient. Meanwhile, others claimed the fire symbolized the total collapse of Portland, a city burning from the inside out. Even those who didn't buy the Antifa angle couldn't deny the eerie timing. It was just too on the nose. But here's where the smoke clears. When you strip away all the noise, the actual facts were plain as day. The blaze started at the wheel well. Firefighters responded, ended the fire. Nobody got hurt. And Ice Cube himself made it crystal clear. It wasn't personal. Still, by then that truth barely mattered anymore. Because once a celebrity's name hits a breaking story, it stops being an incident and becomes a movement. The rumor mill doesn't need facts, it just needs fire. And this one single burned up bus turned into a political weapon overnight. Trump supporters and Antifa critics screamed it was proof of extremism gone wild. Meanwhile, skeptics shrugged it off as another internet fever dream, but the memes and headlines were already doing the real damage. The whole idea that someone might have confused a rap legend's $1 million ride for a government ICE bus was both hilarious and horrifying. Hilarious because, seriously, how could anyone make that mix-up? But terrifying because it showed just how far gone things had gotten. People ready to torch anything that looked remotely official. It wasn't just a fire. It was a mirror reflecting how unhinged America's streets had become. Through all the chaos, Ice Cube kept his cool like a boss. He didn't point fingers, didn't throw blame, didn't let the noise drag him in. He simply said, "A coward like that would burn anybody's property." A sharp line that hit hard without naming names. It was calm but powerful, leaving people guessing. Maybe it wasn't even about him at all. Cube's always been vocal about social issues, but this time he played chess, not checkers, refusing to let the internet twist his words into another political circus. And that move, brilliant. By staying silent on the rumors and not feeding the drama, Cube made sure the story stayed foggy, not a full-blown Antifa versus Ice Cube headline, just a mysterious snapshot of a wild, divided moment in American life. Instead of becoming a scandal, it turned into a reflection of how messy and unpredictable those years really were. In the end, the fire didn't stop his tour, didn't hurt anyone, and didn't dent his legacy one bit. But the meaning of that blaze burned way deeper than scorched metal. It became a snapshot of America's chaos, Portland's unrest, Antifa's rage, Trump's crackdown, and a nation addicted to outrage, all collided on that strange, smoky night. Whether it was Antifa targeting the wrong bus or just bad luck striking at the worst time, the story stuck because it spoke to something bigger than celebrity drama. It connected a hip-hop icon, a federal agency, and a movement that had everyone's nerves fried. It showed how even a random spark could turn into a political wildfire overnight. And when the smoke finally cleared over Portland, one truth stood tall. Ice Cube wasn't chasing fame or headlines. He was standing for something real. His Truth to Power tour wasn't just about music, it was about impact.
In my new record, I say I was Kendrick before Kendrick.
That's my point, but yeah. Kendrick is Cube after Cube.
He was reminding the world that when things fall apart, truth still matters and power only means something if you use it for a purpose. Cube wasn't in Portland to beef with Antifa or flex on the government. He was there to drop messages that hit deeper than the beat. That tour carried decades of weight, rebellion, reflection, and resistance. From the late 80s to now, Cube's voice has been a mirror to the times, loud, raw, and impossible to ignore. To really understand why this bus fire story hit the culture so hard, you've got to look past the flames and straight at the man himself. Ice Cube isn't just a rapper, he's a movement, a mind that shaped both hip-hop and politics for generations. Every city he steps into, the energy shifts, and that's why Portland didn't just get a concert that night, it got a moment in history.
So doing that movie, what ended up happening is, of course, my fans show their kids the movie.
Yep.
Now the parents don't have to say, you know who that dude is right there? That's Ice Cube.
Cube's Truth to Power tour wasn't some nostalgia act, it was a mission with purpose. He's always treated music like a weapon, blending rhythm with raw truth. From his explosive NWA beginnings to his fearless solo grind, Cube's lyrics have never been just rhymes. They've been wake-up calls. Every verse carried a message, hitting on the real stuff: police brutality, systemic injustice, and what it means to keep standing tall in a world that feels built against you. And that's what made Portland the perfect battlefield for his message. The city's mix of activism, tension, and rebellion made it the ideal backdrop for Cube's fire. Portland's streets already pulsed with protest energy, and when Cube showed up, it was like the music finally met the moment. Fans didn't just buy tickets for a show, they came for a sermon in beats and bars. Those tracks that once shook America in the late 80s and 90s were echoing again, just as relevant, just as bold, because the same battles were still being fought. Then came the fire, and everything flipped in seconds. Truth to Power turned into Bus on Fire. The irony was unreal. Cube came to speak truth, but chaos tried to steal the spotlight. Still, even that blaze couldn't dim his impact. Before firefighters even hit that smoking wheel well, Ice Cube had already left his mark on American culture, etched in bold letters across music, film, and history. Born O'Shea Jackson in South Central LA, Cube didn't just enter the rap game, he detonated it. His voice with NWA was revolutionary, shaking the nation to its core. Their 1988 classic Straight Outta Compton wasn't just an album, it was a cultural explosion. And when he dropped Fought the Police, it wasn't just a song, it was a rally cry heard from the streets to Capitol Hill. Authorities hated it, but the people living that struggle felt seen for the first time. That record didn't just make noise, it made history. So when Cube rolled into Portland decades later, this wasn't a man on tour, it was a legacy coming full circle. The same fire that once set off alarms in LA was still burning, still loud, still unfiltered. By the time he released America's Most Wanted and Death Certificate, Cube had already earned his spot as one of hip-hop's sharpest truth-tellers. His pen cut deep, brutally honest, politically charged, and fearless. He wasn't rapping just to entertain, he was exposing. Every line hit like a gut punch, peeling back the layers of corruption, inequality, and pain that America tried to bury. Ice Cube didn't just tell stories, he told the truth people were too afraid to face.
Primarily, it's for our own safety. The far right and the state would have a history of targeting anti-fascists.
But Cube's fire didn't stop at the mic. He stormed into Hollywood and flipped the whole game again. In the 90s and 2000s, he proved no label, no lane, no stereotype could box him in. He wrote and starred in Friday, that hood comedy masterpiece that went from a quiet cult gem to a worldwide classic. Then he flipped the script with Boys in the Hood, serving up heartbreak and hard truth about South Central life. One minute he had you cracking up, the next minute you were holding back tears. Nobody balanced real and raw like Cube. Then came his family era. Movies like Are We There Yet turned Ice Cube into a household name. Kids who didn't even know his rap history were quoting his movie lines. He became that rare type of star who could make gangster rap fans, suburban parents, and their kids all vibe to the same legacy. That's not just fame, that's cultural power. So when Cube touched down in Portland in 2020, he wasn't just another rapper rolling through town. He was a living legacy in motion, decades deep in the game, still commanding respect from every corner. His music had already inspired the next wave. Artists like Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, and a generation of lyricists who followed his fearless blueprint. Stay bold, stay loud, stay real. Younger fans might have known him from family favorites like Are We There Yet? Or Barbershop, while teens and college kids rediscovered his story through the Straight Outta Compton biopic, the one that brought NWA's journey to the big screen. And the wild part? His concerts still sell out everywhere. You'll see fans from every decade, 80s OGs, 90s heads, and Gen Z kids, screaming the same bars that once shook America. That's generational power right there. Cube even laughs about it in interviews. He meets young fans quoting lines from Friday without even realizing he wrote them. He says parents will point at him and tell their kids, "That's Ice Cube, the legend," and the looks on their faces say it all. His art crossed every boundary, race, age, background, you name it. Ice Cube didn't just build a career, he built a bridge, one that connects voices, generations, and cultures through his words, beats, and screenplays. His fingerprints are all over American pop culture. You can feel his presence in the music, the movies, even the memes. His influence doesn't fade, it multiplies. And here's the crazy part. His creative spark even helped shape one of the biggest games in history. His collaborations with DJ Pooh inspired the gritty world of Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. That's right, those street vibes, the realism, the soundtrack that felt too real, they all carried Cube's creative DNA. His stories didn't just live on wax, they rewired how the world tells stories about urban America. From studio speakers to movie screens to gaming consoles across the globe, Ice Cube's voice is still echoing loud and clear, and it's nowhere near done. And Cube's range? Unreal. For a man who started out as hip-hop's face of raw rebellion, he proved he could switch gears anytime he wanted and still own the moment. One second he's spitting razor-edged truth about the system. The next he's cracking jokes as the calm but stressed dad in Are We There Yet? That kind of versatility doesn't just earn respect, it builds legacy. Cube didn't just make fans, he built generations that vibe with him no matter where they came from. So when the Portland crowd packed in for his show, nobody cared about the burned-up bus drama. They came to see a legend in action. The moment Cube hit the stage, it was like time folded back. Same truth. He tore through the classics that built his empire, tracks that once shook the streets and rewrote what rap could be, then hit newer joints that showed he's still sharp, still relevant, still leading from the front. Every lyric hit with purpose, justice, strength, and power for the people. But here's where it got almost eerie. The timing was unreal. Just a few blocks away, Antifa protesters and federal agents were clashing in the streets. Sirens, chants, flashbangs. It all echoed through the night while Cube stood under the spotlight rapping about the same injustice unfolding outside. It felt like his lyrics had come alive, spilling out of the speakers and into the chaos of the real world. His performance wasn't just a concert, it was prophecy, loud and alive under flashing lights and tear gas. And that's exactly why the whole bus fire story refused to fade. For any other artist, a tour bus fire would have been just a random mishap. But for Cube, it became a symbol, a blank wall where America painted its own fears and frustrations. Some said it proved Antifa's recklessness, others called it a tragic misunderstanding, but everyone had an opinion. The story stuck not because of the flames, but because Cube is bigger than any single moment. To millions, he's the embodiment of truth, someone who speaks it, lives it, and never backs down. To others, he's proof of Black excellence, rising from the streets to shape global culture. And to the world, he's the ultimate reminder that hip-hop, once labeled dangerous, became one of America's loudest, proudest exports, built on voices like his. That's what made Portland such a powerful stop for his Truth to Power tour. It wasn't just another city, it was a reflection of America's contradictions, a place that calls itself progressive, yet still bleeds tension, protest, and division on the same blocks. And when Ice Cube stood on that stage, spitting truth to a city in chaos, it felt like everything, the fire, the music, the movement, had come full circle. He wasn't just performing for Portland, he was holding up a mirror to the whole country. What went down in Portland wasn't just a Portland problem, and Ice Cube knew that better than anyone. His music has always taken local struggle and stretched it across the map, showing how pain in one neighborhood echoes through the whole country. So when his tour bus went up in flames, whether by accident or sabotage, it stopped being about property and became something deeper. It turned into a symbol of what happens when truth-tellers get caught in the very chaos they're warning the world about. Even the voices calling for change can get scorched by the fire they're trying to expose. Then came the twist that sent the whole thing into overdrive: Trump's battle on Antifa. Suddenly, one artist's burned bus was colliding with one of the biggest political storms in modern America. To understand why this moment blew up the way it did, you've got to unpack what Antifa really is, or what people think it is, and why that single word sets off explosions of outrage wherever it's mentioned. President Donald Trump wasted no time making Antifa his favorite villain. During his presidency, he painted them as violent radicals, enemies of law and order, proof that America was being attacked from within. He didn't just criticize, he went all in, framing them as the ultimate threat to national stability and using their name to justify his crackdown on protests. It became his rallying cry: fight the left, restore control. Then came September 17th, a day that shook social media. Trump jumped on Truth Social and dropped a bombshell statement. I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, as a major terrorist organization. I will also be strongly recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices. That post hit like an earthquake. Never before had a US president tried to brand a domestic activist movement as a terrorist organization. Until then, that label was reserved for international groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, not for loose, leaderless networks of local protesters. Legal experts went into panic mode, warning that this move clashed head-on with the First Amendment and could open the door to criminalizing dissent itself. Critics fired back instantly, saying Antifa wasn't even a real organization. It was an idea, a symbol of resistance. There were no leaders, no office, no official membership, just individuals united by one belief: standing against fascism and authoritarian control. For supporters, Antifa wasn't terrorism, it was defiance. But for opponents, it represented chaos, street violence, and destruction. And that's what made the whole Ice Cube situation hit even harder. His bus fire wasn't just about a flame, it became part of the same national conversation about power, rebellion, and control. Portland wasn't just burning for itself, it was a mirror of what America had become: divided, defensive, and dangerously close to tearing itself apart. But none of that stopped Trump's version of the story from taking over. His framing spread like wildfire. Social media, cable news, talk radio, everywhere you looked, people were echoing his words. Supporters ran with it hard, claiming Antifa was behind every protest that turned violent, every fire that sparked, every image of chaos plastered across the evening news. And caught right in that storm, Ice Cube's burned tour bus. Overnight, it became another example in the narrative of so-called left-wing destruction, even though there was zero proof tying it to anything political. The irony was off the charts. One of hip-hop's most fearless truth-tellers, someone who built his career exposing injustice, had suddenly become a talking point in America's war over terrorism, freedom, and protest. What should have been a simple tour mishap turned into a weapon in the culture war, twisted and tossed between political sides like fuel on an already raging fire. To really grasp how wild this all got, you've got to understand what Portland had turned into by then. It wasn't just a city, it was ground zero for a national showdown between Antifa-linked protesters and federal agents. What began as marches against police brutality had morphed into nightly riots around government buildings. Streets turned into war zones, flashing lights, tear gas, fireworks, and endless confrontations that blurred the line between protest and battle. Federal agents said they were getting pelted with rocks, bottles, and explosive fireworks, while downtown Portland looked like something out of an apocalyptic movie. Graffiti everywhere, boarded windows, and clouds of gas hanging in the air. The Department of Homeland Security even dropped public statements claiming rioters in Portland have repeatedly attacked and laid siege to an ICE processing center. Arrests followed, with several protesters slapped with federal charges that only deepened the tension. Then the story took an even darker turn. Reports surfaced that Rose City Antifa, recently branded a domestic terrorist organization, had illegally doxxed ICE officers, leaking personal addresses online. Some officers even received direct threats. The images flooding Twitter and Instagram told the story without words. Federal buildings boarded up, walls screaming "War on ICE" in spray paint, scorch marks from fireworks burning across the concrete. Flyers floated through the streets calling on activists to suit up, throw on masks and helmets, and bring that same unfiltered Portland energy back to the front lines. So when Ice Cube's luxury bus went up in flames right in the middle of all that chaos, it didn't matter what the fire report said. It fit the story people were already telling themselves. The city was burning, the country was divided, and one rapper's ride had become another spark in America's firestorm of fear, politics, and perception. In a city as tense as Portland, it didn't sound far-fetched at all that someone could have mistaken Ice Cube's tour bus, decked out with the giant word ICE, for a government ride. Whether Antifa had anything to do with the blaze or not, the symbolism hit way too close to home. For Trump supporters and law and order loyalists, it was the perfect headline waiting to happen. This is what happens when radicals take over your city. The narrative practically wrote itself, tailor-made for outrage and endless cable debates. But the truth behind Antifa runs way deeper than any soundbite. To its followers, Antifa isn't an organization, it's a movement. A loose, leaderless collective bonded by one mission: fighting fascism by any means necessary. That structureless setup has always been their greatest shield and their biggest weakness. Without leaders or membership roles, the government can't easily infiltrate or shut them down. But that same mystery lets critics spin them into some dark, faceless army lurking behind every protest gone wrong. Most Antifa activists show up in what they call black bloc style, dressed head to toe in black, faces hidden behind masks, moving together like one shadow. And when asked why they cover up, they say it's about protection. Protection from cops, online mobs, and extremists who track them down after protests. They claim anonymity isn't about guilt. It's about safety in a system that watches, records, and targets dissent. But not everyone buys that explanation. For many, that same mask hides more than faces. It hides mayhem. Critics argue the black bloc doesn't just shield protesters. It covers up the vandals, agitators, and chaos junkies who show up just to break stuff. And that's where things got explosive. Because while Portland was tearing itself apart, Cube's burning bus became a symbol of everything spinning out of control. Accident or not, it reflected the paranoia, the politics, and the pressure cooker that America had turned into. And then came a voice from the inside, Gabriel Nadales. Once part of the movement himself, Nadales later walked away and wrote Behind the Black Mask, My Time as an Antifa Activist, exposing what he called the truth behind the ideology. His story peeled back the curtain and left jaws dropping. In interviews, Nadales didn't sugarcoat a thing. He said flat out, their true enemy isn't just the far right. It's our system of government and society as a whole. According to him, Antifa wasn't only fighting fascists, it was fighting the foundation of America itself. He described a mindset that glorified confrontation, where broken windows and street chaos were seen as revolutionary art. To Nadales, Antifa had stopped being about defending the people and started becoming a movement fueled by rage, wrapped in righteousness, and blind to the line between protest and destruction. And in that storm of symbolism, Ice Cube's burned bus became more than metal and ash. It became a reflection of America's deeper fracture. Two sides, two realities, one nation on edge, and a fire that said more about the times than any headline ever could. Gabriel Nadal's explosive testimony gave fuel to Trump's version of the story, painting Antifa as a radical anti-American force hell-bent on chaos. But underneath that, it revealed something even deeper. This was never just about shattered glass or graffiti. For some inside the movement, burning down the system and rebuilding it from scratch. The media didn't know how to handle it. Coverage of Antifa became a minefield. Mainstream outlets acknowledged the violence tied to some protests, while others argued it had to be seen in context as pushback against organized hate groups and extremist rallies. The clash over how to define resistance versus terror hit a boiling point after Charlottesville in 2017, when white supremacists and counter-protesters collided in a fatal confrontation that left the nation shaken. Then came Trump's now infamous line, "Very fine people on both sides." That quote poured gasoline straight onto an already raging fire. Overnight, every discussion about Antifa turned into a shouting match across America. On CNN, Chris Cuomo clashed live with a Trump supporter who compared Antifa to neo-Nazis. Cuomo snapped back, saying their actions might be illegal, but their purpose, fighting fascism, wasn't morally equal to hate. That single debate captured the country's divide in one unforgettable TV moment. So the big question kept echoing across headlines. Is Antifa a domestic terror threat trying to tear America apart, or a militant shield standing up to fascism's return? The answer, it seemed, depended less on truth and more on politics. For Trump and his base, spotlighting Antifa was strategic. It shifted attention away from right-wing extremism, which experts said was responsible for most domestic terror acts. It also gave him a perfect villain, an enemy to rally against, a face for every protest and riot that rattled his presidency. And it didn't stop there. The story fed perfectly into his favorite narrative, America under siege by radical leftists. He even hinted there were secret donors bankrolling the chaos. In one interview, Trump said, "Antifa, it's a terrorist organization in my opinion, and we're going to find out who bankrolls it." That one statement lit his supporters up like fireworks. Suddenly, every protest, every act of vandalism, every chaotic night from Portland to D.C. was pinned on a shadowy Antifa network that barely anyone could define. Online forums, talk shows, and social media went wild, spinning stories about underground funding and secret coordination. And just like that, one small fire on one tour bus got swept into a political hurricane that blurred the line between activism, anarchy, and agenda. When Trump was pressed on whether billionaires like George Soros were secretly funding Antifa, he gave that signature smirk and said, "You hear Soros? I don't know. We're going to find out." That offhand remark lit the fuse for a brand new wave of conspiracy theories. Suddenly, the idea of elite billionaires financing chaos became gospel in corners of the right-wing media. Clips, hashtags, and think pieces exploded overnight, all pushing the same mysterious narrative. But here's the twist. Despite all that noise, official investigations never found anything solid behind those claims. No deep pockets, no secret donors, no grand conspiracy, just a movement too scattered, too unpredictable, and too misunderstood for anyone to fully control. Yet by then, the story had already done its damage, and Ice Cube's name had been pulled right into the center of it all. Former insiders like Gabriel Nadales, who actually lived inside the Antifa movement, set the record straight. He said most local chapters were self-funded, running on small donations, merch sales, and underground shows, not secret wire transfers from billionaires pulling strings. But still, that hidden money story wouldn't die. It was too juicy, too convenient. It made Antifa look like some massive, organized shadow army instead of what it really was, a scattered mix of activists, punks, and radicals united by frustration more than structure. Then came the real explosion, the legal one. Trump's push to officially brand Antifa a terrorist organization sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond. It wasn't like targeting Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Antifa had no leaders, no headquarters, no chain of command. It wasn't even a group, it was an idea. So calling it terrorist wasn't just about chasing suspects. It meant criminalizing a belief system. That's a dangerous line, and once crossed, it's hard to walk back. Legal experts went into full panic mode, saying the move could rip straight through the Constitution. They warned that labeling an ideology as terrorism could gut the First Amendment completely. If the government could slap that title on Antifa, what's to stop the next administration from branding any movement as a threat? What about racial justice activists, environmental defenders, even religious organizations? Once that door swings open, free speech doesn't just get tested, it gets torched. But Trump's base wasn't trying to hear any of that. Supporters doubled down, claiming Antifa's street tactics, fires, smashed windows, intimidation, went way beyond protest. To them, this wasn't about politics or rights. It was about safety, order, and control. One conservative commentator yelled live on air, "These aren't protests, these are crimes." And that line hit home for millions. In their eyes, Antifa wasn't practicing free speech. It was waging on America's streets. And for Trump's followers, labeling them terrorists wasn't suppression. It was justice served loud and clear. That clash between protest and public safety cut right to America's core. Where does protest end, and where does terrorism begin? For Trump, there was no middle ground. In his eyes, Antifa wasn't a gray area. It was the villain, period. No debate, no nuance, just black and white. Chaos versus control. But what makes Antifa so hard to pin down is the philosophy driving it, an old-school anarchist idea called propaganda by the deed. The concept flips the playbook of traditional protest upside down. It says the act itself is the message. Smashing a window, lighting a small fire, tossing a brick. These aren't random acts of rage, they're signals. Statements meant to scream, "We're here and we won't be silenced." That's why Antifa's tactics often look more theatrical than tactical, because they are. It's rebellion as performance, chaos as communication. But in a nation already split down the middle, that kind of spectacle turns dangerous fast. Every shattered window, every spark in the street becomes more than a stunt. It becomes fuel for the endless battle between sides, fighting to define what justice even means anymore. See, Antifa's core goal isn't to take power or run governments. It's to build a culture of resistance. They want to inspire, not rule, to push people into action, not into office. But that's exactly why they're so easily branded as terrorists. When the fire itself becomes the message, the line between activism and anarchy blurs in an instant. And that's where Ice Cube's bus fire came crashing back into the spotlight. Accident or not, the timing made it too easy to fold into the Antifa chaos narrative. It became another viral symbol of disorder, a fresh image for talk shows and headlines to point at and say, "See? This is what happens when Antifa shows up." Whether they actually had anything to do with it didn't even matter anymore. The story fit the mood, and perception beat out reality once again. To really grasp the mindset behind the movement, you've got to look at who Antifa idolizes and who they reject. They're not quoting politicians or following polished leaders in suits. Their icons are revolutionaries, the bold, the defiant, the ones who went toe-to-toe with power itself. Former members say the inspiration comes from figures like Che Guevara, the Zapatistas, and other anti-establishment fighters who believe true change doesn't happen at the ballot box. It happens in the streets. That's the fire Antifa tries to carry forward, a movement built on confrontation, not compromise. And in a country already trembling under division, that fire doesn't just burn, it explodes, turning every act of rebellion into another spark in America's long, uneasy battle with itself. Mainstream progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Antifa sees them as way too soft. Some local chapters even mocked AOC's Green New Deal, calling it a capitalist half measure that props up the same system they want to destroy. Former activist Gabriel Nadal said it straight. They think AOC's not left enough. In their eyes, anyone still playing by the government's rules is already compromised. And when it comes to enemies, Antifa's list doesn't stop with far-right extremists. They see the entire American system as the real enemy. Republicans, Democrats, police, ICE officers, they're all viewed as soldiers defending capitalism, which Antifa equates with oppression itself. That worldview puts them in conflict not just with Trump's base, but with almost everyone in the political mainstream. In their minds, the whole system is broken, and anyone protecting it is part of the problem. But here's where it turns truly dangerous. Antifa's rise didn't happen in a vacuum. Their fiery street presence triggered a direct reaction on the other side. The rise of right-wing groups like the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. Both see themselves as patriots defending America from the Antifa threat. So when those worlds collide, masks versus tactical vests, flags versus fists, the streets turn into battlegrounds. And that's the nightmare loop America's been stuck in ever since. One side strikes, the other strikes back, and the tension only gets hotter. Every punch, every shattered window, every viral video becomes fuel, recruiting more followers, radicalizing the next wave, setting the stage for another clash. Gabriel Nadal's warned about this vicious cycle perfectly. When the Boogaloo Boys show up and beat up Antifa, Antifa doesn't disappear. They go home, recruit more, and come back stronger. That's the endless feedback loop. Violence breeding violence until nobody remembers how it even started. And that's exactly why the fire on Ice Cube's tour bus hit so hard. Through that lens, it stopped being just an accident. It became a symbol of this endless escalation. Even if Antifa had absolutely nothing to do with it, the suspicion alone told the real story. It showed how deep the distrust runs, how fast people are to point fingers, and how every small spark gets twisted into something bigger, darker, and more divisive. Because in today's America, perception burns faster than truth, and Ice Cube's bus fire, just one blaze in one city, ended up mirroring a nation where outrage never cools, and every side thinks the other is the real arsonist. In the end, the Portland bus fire wasn't just about a burned-up ride. It was a reflection of America's madness staring back at itself. The spectacle drowned out the truth, twisting a single late-night fire into a national flashpoint. For Trump supporters, it became proof of Antifa's. For critics, it showed how fast a rumor can explode into a political weapon. The wild part, the real cause of the fire still isn't confirmed, and at this point it almost doesn't matter. What mattered was the story it told, the sides it fueled, and the outrage it unleashed. Just like Antifa uses symbolic acts to spark movements, politicians and media outlets use symbolic moments to ignite emotions. That's how a random spark turned into propaganda by the deed, not because of who lit it, but because of what it came to mean. A country so divided it's ready to set itself on fire just to prove a point. So, what do you think? Accident, protest, or message? Drop your thoughts down below and let's talk about it. Make sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see the real story behind the smoke. And don't go anywhere. Tap one of those boxes on your screen for more stories that'll have you saying, "No way that really happened." See you on the next one.